Welcome to the books page of the Sacred Attention Therapy website. When the great neo-Jungian revisionist James Hillman reviewed his childhood to try and understand how he had been seemingly illiterate, unable to form letters, and was considered backward in his class in school, he looked back many years later, and in his book The Soul's Code, he explained that within him was a seed of his destiny to write many books. And read one of James Hillman's books and it will be enlightening for you, I'm sure. He realized that he had many books to write, and somewhere inside him, intuitively, instinctively, he recoiled from the great task that awaited him in his life. Now, I'm no James Hillman. He was a brilliant writer, a brilliant man, a scholarly man, and a great revisionist of psychological tradition. So in some ways I have an identification with him, should we say, but without purporting to his greatness in any shape or form. I had my own fear of words, my own fear of paper, my own fear of accumulating writing in early life. And so whenever I wrote things, I would throw them away, or throw papers away. I couldn't stack papers. I didn't collect books. As you can see, that's changed over the years, and now I collect books and all sorts of things, and I have what I call a living library. But some years ago, my wife said to me, "Tell me the 10 things that you've learned in all your years of therapy and spiritual practice." And I thought that was a wonderful challenge and a wonderful test. And out of that I wrote a small book called The Book of Being, which I produced privately in a small printing, and then would sell at workshops and so on and so on. Now the hard copy book, I have 1 or 2 for myself here, but is available as a download. The Book of Being is a small book, but it was an interesting basis for beginning to write in all seriousness. My therapist and spiritual teacher, who had most influenced me at that point, would always say books are dust, and so it wasn't really my tendency to move towards writing and towards inflicting more written material on the field, which is burgeoning with books and everybody's thoughts and ideas and stories, of course. However, it was in my destiny, as an old friend once said to me, "You will be a writer." And I said, "I don't think so." Well, turned out I was a writer. Book of Being was my first effort. I'd written a few articles before that, and the 10 points that were raised in answer to my wife's question, what are the 10 things, most important 10 things that you've learned from all your years in personal growth and spiritual practice, blossomed into The Flight of Consciousness, which was for me a big work. It was much bigger book than the Book of Being, still not a huge book, but I wrote it at the time with a lot of influence from the Tao Te Ching, and when I presented it to my editor at the publishers, he said, "Look, you've got to explain, you've got to illustrate, you've got to argue your point," and this hadn't really occurred to me. I was that naive about writing. So I capitulated to his requests, and I illustrated copiously. I brought in quotes, I argued points perhaps, and I poured it all together out of the stark statement style of the Tao Te Ching and Chinese spiritual writing. And The Flight of Consciousness was my first published work, which addressed the confusion that I had experienced over many years in psychotherapy, where clients would come to me and they would try to be understanding the apparent contradictions in Buddhism, mystical Christianity, Hinduism, Sufism, and so forth. And to me, there wasn't a contradiction, and the Flight of Consciousness attempts then to expound the stages of psychospiritual growth and development. Tao's Gift was the beginning of a project which never really came to fruition. It was one of what I'd proposed to be many transcripts of seminars, but at least there's one. And if you have or ever bother to download Tao's Gift and have a look, there's some wonderful moments in exchange. Tao's Gift is based on a discussion seminar, a lecture and seminar that I gave on a story called Keng's Disciple, which is in the Changzu, which is another Taoist scripture. And Keng's Disciple is outstanding because in a 2,000-more-year-old story, it presents all of the obstacles that we face on the spiritual path. So Tao's Gift then was followed for me by Your Essential Self, which had come out of a book called Human Awakening, which proved to be too big, too detailed, too full of all sorts of things to publish, at least in the present milieu, at least with the publishers that I approached. I eventually realized that I had to halve the book at least, and so Human Awakening became Your Essential Self. It was taken up by Llewellyn Worldwide, and it's my current published book, and I recommend it to you for the exercises and for the, as has been fed back to me many times, it's like having your own therapist or guide in a book. Therefore, it's a kind of self-help book. I would always say at some point you want to embellish it with one-to-one work with individual guidance of some sort in the psychospiritual process. I followed Your Essential Self with 2 ebooks which came out of transcripts of discourses that I gave online, and they proved to be viable book material. The first is Dharma Sky, the second is Moksha Dawn, and they contain an awful lot of material of my thinking and the progression of my understanding of psychospiritual truths through the last several years and before that. And we were able to produce the ebooks with notes and bibliography and lots of other details to make them quite full and helpful, I think, to many people. So I recommend you Dharma Sky and Moksha Dawn for some very accessible and approachable understanding of profundities in the psychospiritual process. It will be followed shortly by the soon-to-be published Bodhi Ocean, which will complete the trilogy. And the trilogy will comprise 42 individual lectures. There's 14 in each book. So Bodhi Ocean comes soon, end of the year, possibly early 2016. And at present I'm working on my new book, which is or will be called Your Sacred Calling, and that also will be part of a trilogy comprising Your Essential Self, Your Sacred Calling, and a further book to be known as Your Divine Being. Please look at the books, please read the books, please understand them. A book like Your Essential Self or Flight of Consciousness arguably needs to be read more than once. Many people I know keep the Flight of Consciousness next to their bed and they read it over a period of years and they understand more and more as the time goes on. Similarly with Your Essential Self, it's very integrated in terms of exercises and inner work that you can do in direction there. So whenever anybody says to me, for example, how do I do this? How can I approach this? How do I go about it practically? They say, well, look at Your Essential Self, because it's full of practical examples alongside the written philosophy, psychology, theory, and illustrations. Hope you enjoy the body of my work. It's all there for you to learn from, to understand, and please write to us via the contact link on this website. Tell us what you think of the books, tell us if they've helped, tell us if you have any thoughts or experiences you want to share.